Doing it again. Hi guys, this is Allison from Alleycat Creations. How are you? I got a new chair and it's really comfy. I'm happy I got it on sale. If you get anything, press that like, share, and subscribe if you haven't yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work, a connect dot, an epiphany, a mind-blown moment, a new book to read, a new author to explore, please consider supporting my work. All the links are in the bottom of this description, and I got artwork for sale via privately through my email. But you can check out my portfolio on Allylatcreations211.com. Business card holders, paintings, pyramids, scullies with copper in them, cool gems, all the high vibing stuff. If you're interested, please email me so that I can customize something, or if you see something that's available, we'll make a deal. So today I'm going to do Blavatsky as best as possible. So I found that I'm allergic to myself. I just find it funny because I'm allergic to earth in my estimation. But I have an allergy to one of the hormones that deals with female reproduction. So it's that time. And yeah, finally figured out why I wasn't feeling good and what's going on now to heal it. I know, a little too much information, but why this chair and other things are necessary so I can do this comfortably. My other chair took a poop. It was a good chair. And it'll still be, you know, used in other capacities. But if I'm sitting for a while, I need to have comfortability, especially for my lower spine. So today we're going to do Cyclic Evolution and Karma from the Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. We're very close to the ending of book 1. Another 30-something odd pages left to go. This should be very exciting. It's been taking forever, but such as life, it happens. It is the spiritual evolution of the inner, immortal man that forms the fundamental tenet in the occult sciences. To realize even distantly such a process, the student has to believe, A, in the one universal life, independent of matter, or what science regards as matter, and B, in the individual intelligences that animate the various manifestations of this principle. Mr. Huxley does not believe in vital force, others do. Dr. J.H. Hutchinson, Sterling's work concerning protoplasm has made no small havoc of this dogmatic negation. Professor Bale's decision is also in favor of a vital principle, and Dr. B.W. Richardson's lectures on the nervous ether have been sufficiently quoted from, thus opinions are divided. The one life is closely related to the one law which governs the world of being, karma. Exoterically, this is simply and literally action, or rather an effect-producing cause. Esoterically, it is quite a different thing in its far-fetching moral effects. It is the unerring law of retribution to say to those ignorant of the real significance, characteristics, and awful importance of this eternal, immutable law, that no theological definition of a personal deity can give an idea of the impersonal, yet ever-present and active principle, is to speak in vain, nor can it be called providence. For providence, with the theists, the Christian Protestants, at any rate, rejoices in a personal male gender, while the Roman Catholics, it is a female potency. Divine providence tempers his believings and blessings to secure that better effects. Wogan tells us, indeed, he tempers them with karma, a sexless principle does not. Throughout the first two parts, it was shown that at the first flutter of renascent life, I'm gonna butcher this name, Savat, you get it. The mutable radiance of the immutable darkness, unconscious in eternity, passes at every new birth of cosmos from an inactive state into one of intense activity, that it differentiates and then begins to work through the differentiation. This work is called karma. The cycles are also subservient to the effects produced by this activity. The one cosmic atom becomes 7 atoms on the plane of matter, and even in each is transformed into a center of energy, that some atom becomes 7 rays on the plane of spirit, and the 7 creative forces of nature radiating from the root essence follow one the right, the other the left path, separate till the end of the Kapla, and yet are in close embrace. What unites them? Karma. The atoms emanated from the central point emanate in their turn new centers of energy, which under the potential breath of Fohat begin their work from within, without, and multiply other minor centers. These, in the course of evolution and involution, form in their turn the roots of developing causes of new effects, from worlds and man-bearing globes down to the genera, species, and classes of all the 7 kingdoms, of which we know only 4. For the blessed workers have received the Thayin Kam in the eternity, the book of aphorisms of Tsongkhapa. Again, I'm sorry about my pronunciations of things. I'm working on it. Thayin Kam is the power or knowledge of guiding the impulses of cosmic energy in the right direction. The true Buddhist, recognizing no personal God nor any father and creator of heaven and earth, still believes in an absolute consciousness, Adi Buddha. And the Buddhist philosopher knows that there are planetary spirits, the Daihan Kohans. But though he emits of spiritual lives, yet as they are temporary in eternity, even they, according to the philosophy, are the Maya of the day, the illusion of a day of Brahma, a short Manvarata of 4,320,000 years. The yin sin of Brahma, a short that yin sin is not for the speculations of man, for the Lord Buddha has strongly prohibited all such inquiry. If the Daihan Kohans and all the invisible beings, the 7 centers and their direct emanations, the minor centers of energy, are the direct reflex of the one light, yet men are far removed from this, since the whole of the visible cosmos consists of self-produced beings, the creatures of karma. thus regarding a personal God as only a gigantic shadow thrown upon the void of space by the imagination of ignorant men. They teach that only two things are objectively eternal, namely Akasha and Nirvana, and that these are one in reality and but a Maya when divided. Buddhists deny creation and cannot conceive of a creator. Everything has come out of Akasha on our earth in obedience to a law of motion inherent in it, and after a certain existence passes away, nothing ever came out of nothing. If a Vedic Brahmin of the Advaita sect, when asked whether he believes in the existence of God, is always likely to answer as Jaculat was answered, I am myself God. A Buddhist, a Sinhalese especially, would simply laugh and say in reply, there is no God, no creation. Yet the root philosophy of both Advaita, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Buddhist scholars is identical, and both have the same respect for animal life, for both believe that every creature on earth, however small and humble, is an immortal portion of the immortal matter, for matter with them has quite another significance than it has with either Christian or materialists, and that every creature is subject to karma. The answer of the Brahmin is one which suggests itself to every ancient philosopher, Kabbalist, and Gnostic of the early days. It contains the very spirit of the Delphic and Kabbalistic commandments, for every esoteric philosophy solved ages ago the problem of what man was, is, and will be, of man's origin, life cycle, intermediable in its duration of successive incarnations or rebirths, and finally of his absorption into the source from which he started. But it is not physical science that we can ever ask to read man for us as the riddle of the past or that of the future, since no philosopher is able to tell us even what man is, as he is known both to physiology and psychology. In doubt whether man was a god or a beast, he is now connected with the latter and derived from an animal. No doubt that the care of analyzing and classifying the human being as a terrestrial animal may be left to science, which occultists of all men regard with veneration and respect. They recognize its ground and wonderful work done by it, the progress achieved in the physical and physiological, and even to a degree in biology. But man's inner spiritual, psychic, and even more moral nature cannot be left to the tender mercies of an ingrained materialism, for not even the higher psychological philosophy of the West is able, in present incompleteness and tendency towards a decided agnosticism, to do justice to the inner, especially to his higher capacities and perceptions, and those stars of consciousness across the road to which such authorities as Mill draw a strong line, says, so far and no far shalt thou go. No occultist would deny that man, no less than the elephant and the microbe, the crocodile and the lizard, the blade of grass, or the crystal is, in his physical formation, the simple product of the evolutionary forces of nature through a numberless series of transformations, but he puts the case differently. It is not against zoological and anthropomorphical discoveries based on the fossils of man and animal that every mystic and believer in a divine soul inwardly revolts, but only against the uncalled for conclusions built on preconceived theories and made it to fit with certain prejudices. Their premises may or may not be always true, and as some of these theories live but a short life, the deductions therefrom must ever be one-sided with materialistic evolutionists. Yet it is on the strength of such very ephemeral authority that most of the men of science frequently receive undue honors when they deserve them the least. to make the working of karma in the periodical renovations of the universe more evident and intangible to the student. When he arrives at the origin and evolution of man, he has now to examine with us the esoteric bearing of the karmic cycles upon universal ethics. The question is, do those mysterious divisions of time called yugas and kapalas by the Hindus, and so very graphically, I don't know how to say that in Greek, cycle ring or cycle circle by the Greeks, have any bearing or any direct connection with human life? Even exoteric philosophy explains that these perpetual circles of time are ever returning on themselves periodically and intelligently in space and eternity. There are cycles of matter, and there are cycles of spiritual evolution. Racial, national, and individual cycles. May not esoteric speculation allow us a still deeper insight into the working of these? The idea is beautifully expressed in a very clever scientific work. Quote, the possibility of rising to a comprehension of a system of coordination so far outreaching in time and space, all reach of human observation. It is a circumstance which signals the power of man to transcend the limitations of changing and inconsistent matter and assert his superiority over in all unstable and perishable forms of being. There is a method in succession of events and in the relation of coexistent things, which the mind of man seizes holds of, and by means of this as a clue, he runs back or forward over eons of material history of which human experience can never testify. Events germinate and unfold. They have a past which is connected with their present, and we feel a well-justified confidence that a future is appointed, which will be similarly connected with the present and the past. This continuity and unity of history repeated themselves before our eyes and in all conceivable stages of progress. The phenomena furnish us with the grounds for the generalization of two laws, which are truly principles of scientific divination, by which alone the human mind penetrates the sealed records of the past and the unopened pages of the future. The first of these is the law of evolution, or to the phase it for our purpose, the law of correlated successiveness or organized history in the individual, illustrated in the changing phases of every single maturing system of results. These thoughts summon into our immediate present the measureless past and the measureless future of material history. They seem almost to open vistas through infinity and to endow the human intellect with an existence and a vision exempt from the limitation of time and space and finite causation, and lift it up toward a sublime apprehension of the supreme intelligence whose dwelling place is eternity. According to the teachings, Maya, or the elusive appearance of the marshaling of events and actions on this earth, changes, varying with nations and places, but the chief features of one's life are always in accordance with the constellation one is born under, or we should say with the characteristics of its animating principle or the deity that presides over it, whether we call it a Daihan Kohan, as in Asia, or an archangel, as with the Greek and the Latin churches. In ancient symbolism, it was always the sun through the spiritual, not the visible. Sun was meant. That was supposed to send forth the chief saviors and avatars. Hence the connecting link between the Buddhas, the avatars, and so many other incarnations of the highest seven, the closer the approach to one's prototype in heaven, the better for the mortal whose personality was chosen by his own personal deity. the seventh principle, as its terrestrial abode. For with every effort of will toward purification and unity with that self-God of the lower rays breaks, and the spiritual entity of man is drawn higher and even higher to the ray that supersedes the first, until from the ray to ray, the inner man is drawn into the one and highest beam of the parent sun. Thus, the events of humanity do run coordinately with the number forms, since the single units of that humanity proceeded one and all from the same source, the central, and its shadow, the visible sun. For the equinoxes and solstices, the periods and various phases of the solar course, astronomically and numerically expressed, are only the concrete symbols of the eternally living variety, and though they do seem abstract ideas to uninitiated mortals, and this explains the extraordinary numerical coincidences with geometrical relations as shown by 7 authors. Yes, our destiny is written in the stars. Only the closer the union between the mortal reflection, man, and his celestial prototype, the less dangerous the external conditions and subsequent reincarnations, which neither Buddhas nor Christs can escape. This is not superstition, least of all it is fatalism. The later implies a blind course of some still blinder power, and man is a free agent during his stay on earth. He cannot escape his ruling destiny, but he has the choice of 2 paths that lead him in that direction, and he can reach the goal of misery, if he such is decreed to him, either in the snowy white robes of the martyr, or in the soiled garments of a volunteer in the iniquitous course. I can't project that word, by the way. For there are external and internal conditions which affect the determination of our will upon our actions, and it is in our own power to follow either of the 2. Those who believe in karma have to believe in destiny, which from birth to death every man is weaving thread by thread around himself as a spider does his cobweb. And this destiny is guided either by the heavenly voice of the invisible prototype outside of us, or by our more intimate astral or inner man, who is but too often the evil genius of the embodied entity called man. Both these lead on the outward man, but one of them must prevail, and from the very beginning of the invisible affray, the stern and implicable law of compensation steps in and takes its course, faithfully following the fluctuations. When the last strand is woven and man is seemingly enwrapped in the network of his own doing, then he finds himself completely under the empire of his self-made destiny. It is then either fixes him like the inert shell against the immovable rock, or carries him away like a feather in a whirlwind raised by his own actions. This is karma. That's also quantum entanglement, by the way. You're entangled to all yourselves. You're entangled to your oversoul and your higher selves and the other higher selves. Because there's more than one. A materialist treating upon the periodical creations of our globe has expressed in one sentence, the whole past of the earth is nothing but an unfolded present. This was Bruckner, who little suspected that he was repeating an axiom of the occultists. It is quite true also, as Burmeister, quote, in Force and Matter remarks that, quote, the historical investigation of the development of the earth has proved that now and then rest upon the same base, that the past has been developed in the same manner as the present rolls on, and that the forces which were in action ever remain the same. The forces their noumena, rather as the same. Of course, therefore, the phenomenal forces must be the same also. But how can anyone feel so sure that the attributes of matter have not altered under the hand of protean evolution? How can any materialist assert with such confidence, as it's done by Ross Meisler, that this eternal conformity in the essence of phenomena renders it certain that the fire and water possessed at all times the same powers and ever will possess them? Who are they, the darkened council, with words without knowledge, and where Huxley's and Bruckner's when the foundations of the earth were laid by the great law? It is a fundamental principle of the occult philosophy, this same homogeny of matter and immutability of natural laws, which are so much insisted upon by materialism, but that unity rests upon the inseparable of spirit from matter. And if the two are once divorced, the whole cosmos would fall back into the chaos and non-being. Therefore, it is absolutely false, and but an additional demonstration of the great conceit of our age, to assert, as men of science do, that all the great geological changes and terrible convulsions have been produced by ordinarily and known physical forces. For these forces were but the tools and final means for the accomplishment of certain purposes, acting periodically and apparently mechanically through an inward impulse mixed up with, but beyond their material nature. There is a purpose in every important act of nature, which acts are all cyclical and periodical. But spiritual forces, having been usually confused with the purely physical, the former are denied by, and therefore have to remain unknown to scientists because left unexamined. Interesting there. Well, the history of the world begins with its general aim, end quote, says Hegel. The rationalization of the idea of spirit only in an implicit, I hate italicized words, I can barely see them, form as such, that is, as nature, a hidden, most profoundly hidden unconscious instinct, and the whole process of history is directed to rendering this unconscious impulse a conscious one, thus appearing in the form of merely natural existence, natural will, that which has been called the subjective side, physical craving, instinct, passion, private interest, as also opinion and subjective conception, spontaneously presents themselves at the very commencement. This vast congeries of volitions, interests, and activities constitute the instruments and means of the world spirit for obtaining its object, bringing it to consciousness and realizing it. And this aim is none other than finding itself, coming to itself, and contemplating itself in concrete actuality, but that those manifestations of vitality on the part of individuals and peoples in which they seek and satisfy their own purposes are at the same time the means and instruments of a higher power, of a higher and broader purpose of which they know nothing, which they realize unconsciously might be made of matter of question, rather than has been questioned. On this point, I announced my view on the very outset and asserted our hypothesis and our belief that reason governs the world and has consequently governed its history. In relation to this independently universal and substantial existence, all else is subservient to it, and the means for its development. No metaphysician or theosophist could demur to these truths, which are all embodied in esoteric teachings, There is a predestination in the geological life of our globe, as in the history, past, and future of races and nations. This is closely connected with what we call karma in Western pantheists, nemesis in cycles. The law of evolution is now carrying us along the ascending arc of our cycle, when the effects will be once more remerged into and re-become the now neutralized causes, and all things affected by the former will have regained their original harmony. This will be the cycle of our special round, a moment in the duration of the great cycle, or the Mahayuga. The fine philosophical remarks of Hegel are found to have their application in the teachings of occult science, which shows nature ever acting with a given purpose, whose results are always dual. This was stated in our first occult volumes in Isis Unveiled. As our planet revolves once every year around the sun, and at the same time turns once in every 24 hours upon its own axis, thus traversing minor circles within a larger one, so is the work of the smaller cyclic periods accomplished and recommended within the great Saros. The revolution of the physical world, according to the ancient doctrine, is attended by a like revolution in the world of intellect, the spiritual evolution of the world proceeding in cycles like the physical one. Thus we see in history a regular alternation of ebb and flow in the tide of human progress. The great kingdoms and empires of the world, after reaching the culmination of their greatness, descend again in accordance with the same law by which they ascend, till, having reached the lowest point, humanity reasserts itself and mounts up once more, the height of its obtained being, by the law of ascending progression by cycles, somewhat higher than the point from which it had before descended. But these cycles, wheels within wheels, so comprehensively and ingeniously symbolized by the various manas and rishis in India, and by the Kabri, the West, do not affect all mankind at one and the same time, as explained in the racial divisions of cycles. Hence, as we see the difficulty of comprehending and discriminating between them with regard to their physical and spiritual effects, without having thoroughly mastered their relations with and action upon the respective positions of nations and races and their destiny and evolution, the system cannot be comprehended if the spiritual action of these periods, preordained, so to say, by karmic law, is separated from their physical course. The calculations of their best astrologers would fail, or at any rate remain imperfect, unless the dual action is thoroughly taken into consideration and dealt with upon these lines. And this mastery can be achieved only through initiation. Interesting there. The grand cycle includes the progress of mankind from the appearance of primordial man of ethereal form. It runs through the inner cycles of man's progressive evolution from the ethereal down to the semi-ethereal and purely physical, down to the redemption of man from his coat of skin and matter, after which it continues running its course downward and then upward again to meet at the culmination of a round, when the Monborotic serpent swallows its tail and 7 minor cycles are passed. These are the great radical cycles. Racial. It's also radical cycles, which affect equally all the nations and tribes included in this special race, but there are minor and national as well as tribal cycles within those. which run independently of each other. They are called in the Eastern esotericism the karmic cycles. In the West, since pagan wisdom has been repudiated as having grown from and been developed by the dark powers supposed to be at constant war and opposition to the little tribal Jehovah, the full and awful significance of the Greek nemesis or karma has been entirely forgotten. Otherwise, Christians would have better realized the profound truth that nemesis is without attributes, that while the dreaded goddess is absolute and immutable as a principle, it is we ourselves, sorry guys, it is we ourselves, nations and individuals, who propel her to action and give the impulse to its direction. Karma, nemesis, is the creator of nations and mortals, but once created, it is they who make of her a fury or a rewarding angel. Yeah. Quote, wise are they who worship nemesis, end quote. As the chorus tells Prometheus, and as unwise they who believe that the goddess may be propitiated by whatever sacrifices and prayers, or have her wheel diverted from the path it has once taken. The triform fates and ever mindful furies are her attributes only on earth, and begotten by ourselves. There is no return from the paths she cycles over, yet those paths are of our own making, for it is we, collectively or individually, who prepare them. Karma / nemesis is the synonym of providence minus design, goodness, and every other finite attribute and qualification, so unphilosophically attributed to the latter. An occultist or philosopher will not speak of the goodness or cruelty of providence, but identifying it with karma / nemesis. He will teach that nevertheless it guards the good and watches over them in this as in future lives, and that it punishes the evildoer, even to his seventh rebirth. So long, in short, as the effect of his having thrown into probation even the smallest atom in the infinite world of harmony has not been finally readjusted. For the only decree of karma, an eternal and immutable decree, is absolute harmony in the world of matter, as it is in the world of spirit. It is not therefore karma that rewards or punishes, but it is we who reward or punish ourselves according to whether we work with, through, and along with nature, abiding by the laws on which that harmony depends on or break them. Nor would the ways of karma be inscrutable, were men to work in union and harmony instead of disunion and strife. For our ignorance of those ways, which one portion of mankind calls the ways of providence, dark and intricate, while another sees in them the action of blind fatalism, and a third, simple chance, with neither gods nor devils to guide them, would surely disappear, if we would but attribute all these to their correct causes, with right knowledge, or at any rate with a confident conviction that our neighbors will no more work to hurt us than we would think of harming them. The 2/3 of the world's evil would vanish into thin air. Were no man to hurt his brother, karma, nemesis, would have neither cause to work for nor weapons to act through. It is the constant presence in our midst of every element of strife and opposition, and the division of races, nations, tribes, societies, and individuals into Cains and Abels, wolves and lambs, that is the chief cause of the ways of providence. We cut these numerous windings in our destinies daily with our own hands, while we imagine that they are pursuing a track on the royal high road of respectability and duty, and then complain of those ways being an intricate and so dark. We stand bewildered before the mystery of our own making and riddles of life that we will not solve, and then accuse the great Sphinx of devouring us. But verily, there is not an accident in our lives, not a mishappened day or misfortune that could be traced back to our own doing in this or in another life. If one breaks the laws of harmony, or as a Theosophical writer expresses it, the laws of life, one must be prepared to fall into the chaos one has oneself produced. For according to the same writer, the only conclusion can come to is that these laws of life are their own avengers, and consequently that every avenging angel is only a typified representation of their reaction. Therefore, if anyone is helpless before these immutable laws, it is not ourselves, the artificers, or our destinies, but rather these angels, the guardians of harmony. Karma nemesis is no more than the spiritual dynamical effect of cause produced and forces awakened into activity by our own actions. It is a law of occult dynamics that a given amount of energy expended on the spiritual or astral plane is productive of a far greater results than the same amount expended on the physical objective plane of existence. This state will last till man's spiritual intuitions are fully opened, with which not happened before, we fairly cast off our thick coats of matter until we begin acting from within instead of ever following impulses from without, namely these produced by our physical senses and gross selfish body. Until then, the only palliative to the evils of life is union and harmony, a brotherhood in act two, an altruism not simply in name. The suppression of one single bad course will suppress not one, but a variety of bad effects. And if a brotherhood, or even a number of brotherhoods, may not be able to prevent nations from occasionally cutting each other's throats, still unify in thought and action and philosophical research into the mysteries of being will always prevent some, while trying to comprehend that which has hereto remained to them a riddle, from creating additional causes in a world already so filled with woe and evil. Knowledge of karma gives the conviction that if virtue in distress, vice in triumph, make atheists of mankind, it is only because that mankind has ever shut its eyes to the great truth that man is himself his own savior, or as his own destroyer, that he need not accuse heaven and the gods, fates and providence of the apparent injustice that reigns in the midst of humanity, but let him rather remember and repeat this bit of Grecan wisdom, which warns man to forbear accusing that which, quote, just though mysterious leads us in unerring through ways unmarked from guilt to punishment, which are now the ways of the high road on which move onward the great European nations. The Western Aryans had every nation and tribe like their Eastern brethren of the fifth race, their golden and their iron ages, their period of comparative irresponsibility of the Satya age of purity, while now several of them have reached their iron age, the Kali Yuga, an age black with horrors. It is true, on the other hand, that the exoteric cycles of every nation have been correctly made to be derived from and depend on sidereal motions. The latter are inseparably blended with the densities of nations and men. But in their purely physical sense, Europe knows of no other cycles than the astronomical and makes its computations accordingly. Nor will it hear of any other imaginary circles or circuits in the starry heavens that grid them. was centric and eccentric, scribbled over, cycle in epicycle, orb in orb. But the pagans with whom, as Coleridge has it, time, psychical time, was their abstraction of the deity. That deity manifesting coordinately with and only through karma and being that karma nemesis itself. The cycles meant something more than a mere succession of events or a periodical space of time of more or less prolonged duration, but they were generally marked with reoccurrences of a more varied and intellectual character than an exhibit in the periodical return of seasons or a certain constellations. Modern wisdom is satisfied with astronomical computations and prophecies based on an erring mathematical laws. Ancient wisdom added to the cold shell of astronomy the vivifying elements of its soul and spirit, astrology. And as the sidereal motions do regulate and determine other events on earth besides potatoes and the periodical disease of that useful vegetable, a statement which, not being amenable to scientific explanation, is merely derided while accepted. Those events have to be allowed to find themselves predetermined by even simple astronomical computations. Believers in astrology will understand our meaning. Skeptics will laugh at the belief and mock the idea, thus they shut their eyes, ostrich-like, to their own fate. Ooh, boy. This because their little historical period, so-called, allows them no margin for comparison. Sidereal heaven is before them, and though their spiritual vision is still unopened and the atmospheric dust of terrestrial origin seals their sight and chains it to the limits of physical systems, still they do not fail to perceive the movements and note the behavior of meteors and comets. They record the periodical advents of those wanderers and flame messengers and prophecy. In consequence, earthquakes, meteor showers, the apparition of certain stars, comets, etc. Are they soothsayers for all of that? No, they are learned astronomers. Why then should occultists and astrologers as learned be disbelieved when they prophesy the return of some cycle event on the same mathematical principle? Why should the claims that they know it be ridiculed? Their forefathers and predecessors having recorded the reoccurrence of such events in their time and day throughout a period of embracing hundreds of thousands of years. The conjunction of the same constellations must necessarily produce, if not quite the same, at any rate similar effects. Are the prophecies derided because of the claim of the hundreds of thousands of years of observation and the millions of years of the human race? In its turn, modern science is laughed at for its far more modest geological and anthropomorphical figures by those who hold a biblical chronology. Thus, karma adjusts even human laughter at the mutual expense of sex, learned societies, and individuals. Yet in the prognostication of such future events, at any rate, are foretold on the authority of cyclic reoccurrences, there is no psychic phenomenon involved. It is neither provision or prophecy, no more than it is the signaling of a comet or a star several years before its appearance. It is simply knowledge and mathematically correct computations which enable the wise man of the East to foretell, for instance, that England is on the eve of such another catastrophe, France nearing such a point of her cycle, and Europe in general threatened with, or rather on the eve of a cataclysm, which her own cycle of racial karma has led her to. The reliability of the information depends, of course, on the acceptation or rejection of the claim for a tremendous period of historical observation. Eastern initiates maintain that they have preserved records of racial development and events of universal import. ever since the beginning of the fourth race, that which preceded being traditional. Moreover, those who believe in seership and occult powers will have no difficulty in crediting the general character, at least of the information given, even if traditional, once the latter is checked and corrected by the collaboration in clairvoyance and esoteric knowledge. But in the present case, no such metaphysical belief is claimed as our chief dependence, but a proof is given on what, to every occultist, is quite scientific evidence, the records preserved through the zodiac for incalculable ages. It is now amply proved that even horoscopes and judiciary astrology are not quite based on a fiction, and that the stars and constellation consequently have an occult and mysterious influence on and connecting with individuals. And if with that latter, why not with nations, races, and mankind in bulk? This again is a claim made on the authority of the zodiacal records. We shall examine them, if you please, for how far the zodiac was known to the ancients and how far it is forgotten by the moderns. And next time we will read the zodiac and its antiquity. That should be very interesting. This was very eye-opening, and I align with a lot of what was said here, because we are the ones that produce our own shit. We're the ones who put out the frequency and have the law of compensation come back to us, whether that's good or bad. We are either magnetizing positively or we are magnetizing negatively. We live in duality. So we're putting out that energy, karma energy. So I think this was a really good analogy. I think this stems, this can go way deeper from when she wrote this very, very, very long time ago to now. I think there could be a lot more even inputted here, but I'm going to leave it there. Sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, protection, and shielding energy. I am on TikTok, so go check me out, Allylat211. I do little shorts, hopefully I'm trying to keep them under 5 minutes, of just things that come to me throughout the day as I channel, and other books that I read. So go check my TikTok channel out. I just started it. Again, if you would like to support my artwork and help support me, Allylatcreations211.com is where you can see a portfolio of my work. I just updated it yesterday, and I hope all of you are having a fantastic day. Be the lighthouse. Be the love. There it goes. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.